Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Frayal from Scrumptious Cakes by Fairy, and in this video I am going to show you how I made this Marvel superhero theme cake. And if you want to see how to make it, then please keep on watching. So the first thing I'm going to do is to take a 12-inch cake board in a square shape, and then I'm going to take a baking paper or parchment paper, whatever you call that in your country, and I'm going to wrap around that paper on the front side of the cake board, and I'm going to staple it from the back, so when we are doing the upside down method it's not going to move around. Now I'm moving on to leveling the cake sponges. I'm using 3 layers of 8-inch round cake, and I'm just removing the brown part from the top and making sure the cake sponges are leveled. I bake at lower temperature so my cakes comes out almost flat. I don't have to waste a lot of it. Now I'm using the 8-inch cake card that's the same size as the cake sponge, and I have smeared some white chocolate ganache, which is going to work as a glue, and I'm sticking the cake sponge onto that. Now I'm spreading some jam, and then I'm going to add some buttercream, and I'm going to use a flat palette knife to spread the buttercream around. I like a good amount of buttercream. If you don't like it that much, you can reduce the amount. That's totally up to you. Now I'm adding the second layer of sponge, and I'm making sure that it is aligned with the bottom one, and I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to add the jam and buttercream layer. And when you're adding the buttercream, don't take it almost to the edges, just leave a little bit of space, because that space is going to work out as a dam when we are going to do the ganache. That will prevent the bulging from the side. Now for the last layer of sponge, I flip it upside down, and now I'm checking the level of the cake if it's perfect. Once I'm assured that it's leveled, I'm going to add ganache and pushing it into that space. I'm not too worried about making it very smooth. I'm just adding the ganache so it can work as a dam for us, and then I'm going to put the cake in the fridge for about 30 minutes for the buttercream to set. Once the buttercream is set in the fridge, then I'm going to take the cake out, and I'm going to add a good amount of white chocolate ganache on the top, spread it around with the flat palette knife, and now I'm going to take that square board we covered earlier and flip the cake upside down. So that's how you do the upside down method for ganaching. Now I'm going to add more ganache on the side, and I'm going to use that cake card as a guide. I'm just filling the gaps right now, and then I'm going to take a side scraper and I'm going to scrape from the side and make it smooth. Keep the scraper at a 90-degree angle and keep smoothing the sides. Once the sides are smooth, I'm going to put the cake in the fridge for an hour for the ganache to set. Once the ganache is set, I'm going to flip it back and remove the square board. Sometimes you get like a little spaces left from like upside down method, so I'm just filling those gaps from the top, and I'm just using my flat palette knife for that. Because the cake is already very cold, the ganache sets very quickly. Now I'm going to divide the cake in like 4 equal parts. First I'm going to find the center, and then I am going to make a cross which is going to divide the cake in 4 equal parts. Now I'm using a pointy tool to make the lines or indents to divide the cake in 4 parts. I think this tool is called Dresden tool. I'm not very sure. You can use the back of a small knife to make the indent. Now I'm just brushing some plain water, and this water is going to act as a glue to stick the fondant. Now I'm rolling a blue fondant piece, and I'm going to cover quarter of the cake with that blue fondant. So all four parts are going to be different color. Once the fondant is applied to the cake, you should be able to see the marks of the cake dividing, and I'm going to follow that mark and cut it by using that ruler or any straight object and sharp knife. Just remove the excess. Now I'm going to take the green fondant and apply it to the second quarter of our cake. And after the first one, you should be able to see the joint of your fondant, as you can see. So it's much easier to follow that joint and just cut it through. Remove the excess by using a sharp knife and keep smoothing it out so the both sides of the fondant joins well. Now I'm going to apply the yellow color fondant and follow the same step. Smooth it out, cut the excess, and make sure the joint is stuck together and the cake underneath is not showing. You might have to push a fondant a little bit to make the joint seamless. Now the last color I'm going to apply is red, and last one is the easiest one. As you can see, both the side joints, and just follow that line. Now I'm going to use my acetate smoothers to make the edges very sharp. I'm just using like a little bit of pressure onto the edges to make them sharp and then smoothing the sides out. Now I'm going to take a 12-inch round board. I have brushed some water over that and I'm going to apply this black fondant onto the board and smooth it out with a smoother and just cut through the excess amount of fondant from the sides with a sharp knife. Now I'm going to take the 8-inch card and I'm just making the indent to make sure where I am putting the cake onto the board. And because my cake is very hard right now, I have used Ganache. I am able to move it just holding it up with the smoothers. Now I'm going to use 4 strips of black fondant and just going to put some water over the joints, and I'm going to hide the joints by using those black strips. So once the joints are covered, I'm going to roll out some white and red fondant, and I'm going to cut about 1/2 inch wide and 2-inch tall pieces of fondant, and I'm going to use that on Captain America's side. Make sure the sizes are the same. Now I'm going to apply some water around the bottom of that blue colored fondant, and I'm going to apply the stripes. Now I have got some blue, red and white fondant. I'm going to make a shield for Captain America side, and I'm using the set of round cutters. So the smallest one will be blue, then the red, then the white, and then red circle again, like this. Now I'm going to cut a white star and add it on the top, and that is going to be the Captain America's shield, and I'm going to use some plain water to stick it onto the top. Now I'm going to make a Hulk face onto the green side of the cake, and I'm just using that Dresden tool to make my indentation where I'm going to paint over. I just keep the image on my phone and in front of me. I just keep looking at that and then just make the indentation onto the cake, and then I use a very fine paintbrush and black gel color to just follow those indentation and paint it over. If you're not good at freehand painting, what I would suggest is to get a printed sugar sheet topper and then stick it with some edible glue or plain water. So first I have lined those indentation which I made with the Dresden tool, and now I'm going to fill those in to make the hair. Now I'm painting the eyes. I'm not really bad at painting freehand, so I don't feel the need of using the printed sugar sheet topper. But I mean, it's totally up to you. If you use the printed sheet topper, it will make your work much easier. If you want to be good at freehand painting, I would suggest you to practice on a piece of fondant before trying it over the cake. Now I'm just making the mouth, just following the indentation and making the outline, and then I'm going to paint the teeth. And the teeth I'm going to fill them in with white paint. Now I'm moving on to the Spider-Man side, which is the red side of our cake, and I'm making the lines for the web. If you don't want to paint, you can use a very thin rolled fondant, but I think I prefer painting over that because you have to like roll it super thin if you want to use the fondant, or use the extruder gun for that, which I really don't like. Now I'm making the scallops to make the web of the spider. So basically you need to make scallops and connect one side of the line to the other side of the line. It's very easy. Now on a black roll fondant, I'm going to cut a round piece with a round cutter and then making the teardrop shape for the body of the spider. And then I'm going to roll black fondant for the legs. I'm just using plain water to stick it onto the Spider-Man side. Now I am going to cut 4 legs for the spider. So the bottom 4 legs are bigger, and then we need 4 legs for the top, which are smaller than the bottom ones. So the bottom one's facing downwards and the top one facing upwards. Now I'm going to move on to the Iron Man face. I would suggest you to get a cutter for cutting the Iron Man mask. If you, I mean, I do have cutter somewhere, but I couldn't find it in my stash, so I'm just cutting it freehand. And I use the same technique, making indentation with the Dresden tool first and then use the X-Acto knife to cut that. If you want to save your time, use the cutter for the mask, or you can get the face printed on a icing sheet and just use plain water and edible glue to stick it onto the Iron Man side. But as I couldn't find my cutter, I had to cut them all freehand. So when I remove the eyes, I keep those little triangles aside because I'm going to use those as a guide to cut the white piece. I'm just using plain water to stick it on the top of the red piece. Now I'm cutting the eyes from the white fondant using those yellow part as a guide, and I'm just pushing those white pieces in the eye sockets. I'm going to stick that over the yellow part of our cake. I have rolled a very thick white fondant. I'm putting the cling film on the top and then cutting a round circle. This way you get a domed shape of the white part because I'm going to make a light. Now I'm using the bigger circles to cut the frame for that light in a gray fondant, and I'm just using plain water to stick that at the front. Now I'm using a very light blue petal dust and I'm just dusting it to make a shading on the edges. This will give an effect of like it's the light is turned on. Now I'm painting over the silver over that gray frame to make it more metallic. Now I'm going to use the Dresden tool to make some indentation to make it like it's the Iron Man's bodysuit. It's just the random lines I'm following. And now I'm going to make Thor's hammer, and I'm using the gray fondant piece to shape it as a rectangle for the hammer bit. I'm just using my smoothers to shape it out. Keep shaping it out until you are happy with that. Once you're happy, just move it on the side. And now I'm going to take a black piece of fondant. I just rolled it as a sausage to make the handle for our hammer, and I have pushed a toothpick stick so it can hold it up straight. Now I am taking a brown fondant strip and just sticking it over the black part. Just making a loop and attaching it to the hammer like this. I'm going to attach the hammer onto the Hulk side because the Hulk side looks really empty from the top, and that's the side I'm going to keep as a front. And I'm going to paint the hammer metallic with the silver paint, and I'm going to paint over some cracks. It's going to look like that the hammer has dropped on the ground and made the cracks onto the ground like this. Now I'm cutting some letters for the name from the white fondant and the numbers. I'm just using a black petal dust to make some shading around the edges of the letters and number. The number I'm going to stick on the top of the Hulk side where I have made the cracks, and the name is going to go at the front of the cake board. So first I'm going to put the letters onto the cake board and position them right in the center, and once I am happy with their position, I'm going to use plain water to stick them over the cake board, and then our cake is done. If you're watching my video very first time, then I will leave the link to the related videos in the description down below. I have the recipe of that white chocolate ganache which I used on this cake, and the recipe of the vanilla buttercream which I have used on this cake, and a tutorial on using acetate smoothers to get the sharp edges on fondant, and I do have a tutorial for upside down method in detail using the buttercream, but I do prefer using ganache. So these videos are going to help you build up your basic skills for cake decorating, so don't forget to check those out. I will leave the links in the description down below. So here is the finished cake. This side is Hulk, this is Captain America, Spider-Man, Iron Man, and that's Thor's hammer. So I hope you liked this tutorial, and if you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!